Hi, I'm David Scranton, and thank you for clicking this video because today we're talking about ways to potentially minimize your tax burden if you haven't yet filed for 2022. So now it's time to bring in today's special guest, Lorraine Grossman. Lorraine is an associate registered investment advisor at Providence Financial and Insurance Services, which is a retirement income store located just outside of LA. Lorraine, as usual, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the Income Generation.
Hey, Dave. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on the program with you. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's tax. It's kind of a rough time. We're almost halfway through tax season. So share, if you will, because you're there in the saddle every day talking to clients, and you see what people do that's good. You see what people do that's not so good when it comes to tax as well as other issues. What are some of the most common tax mistakes that you see people making day in and day out?
Well, some of the most common questions that I receive is, what will my taxes look like in retirement? I think a lot of people, they understand that there's going to be, taxes on their traditional IRAs, their pre-tax 401ks, 403 balances, your SEP and simple IRAs. But also your pension income is taxable. One of the other questions I get is, when I retire, is my tax rate going to be higher or lower than when I was working? Yeah. And I let them know, well, it depends. If the home is paid off, there's no mortgage interest deduction, no children, or you can use as dependents. There's no annual tax-deferred 401k contributions to reduce your income. And one of the other things that retirees forget about when they retire is they're going to be doing a lot more traveling, entertainment. So the income they're using for that entertainment may not be much lower than when they were making that money on their job. So, And then of course, one of the big things that you have to keep in mind is future tax rates. Now, they may be higher than they are today. Now, considering today's political climate and growing national debt, future tax rates could end up being higher than they were today. So these are things that I tell my, people that are asking, my clients, and, these are things you have to look at. Really depends on how you're going to, what's going to be happening in the future, and depending on where your status is and what's going on with you, whether your tax rates can be higher or lower.
Okay. So, I know you talked about retirement plans a little bit, but how about mistakes? How about things that you see people making short-term that are mistakes, not maybe strategic mistakes over the course of their lifetime, but just short-term mistakes in a given year that might be really easy tips for people to correct?
Okay, so some of the biggest things that I've seen is actually taking an IRA rollover the wrong way. So let's say you have $200,000 in your 401k. You're retiring and you take that $200K as a distribution. And let's say you didn't fill out your paperwork correctly. And so your company withholds the taxes. Usually it's like 20% taxes they withhold. So it's about $40,000. Right. And so that taxes on that $40,000, because it's coming from your 401k, well, those taxes are all, what they withheld is also going to be taxed as well. So now you have at a 24% tax rate, you have about $9,000, $9,600 in taxes. Now they could have avoided that if they just did a direct transfer from the 401k to another custodian directly into an IRA or a Roth IRA. That's one of the things I see a lot of people that are doing, believe it or not, even today, they're doing that mistake. The other thing is not withholding taxes on their pensions or their Social Security benefits. A lot of people are running into that problem where they, come out and they forget, they don't realize that, their Social Security benefits are being taxed. So when it comes around tax season, what do you think happens? All of a sudden they owe a lot of taxes, and they either have already spent it, or they didn't realize it, or they don't have it. So those are some of the things I'm running into. The other thing that I'm running into as far as a tax problem is taking out your RMDs incorrectly. It's causing them to have a 50% penalty because they didn't take out that RMD correctly.
Yeah, that's a big one. The biggest penalty assessed anywhere in the IRS code, 50%. So let's talk about like IRAs and retirement plans. And, what's your theory on that? Some advisors say, hey, put everything away pre-tax so you can get as much money into a plan for as little economic loss sacrifice today, and then push the tax can down the road, let all that money be tax deferred and growing for you. Others say, you're better off paying tax on the seed and not the harvest, doing something more like a Roth IRA. Where do you stand with that?
Well, I think that really depends on where the client is. You have to, as a fiduciary, you have to look at what's going on with them in the future, what their needs are in the present. Do they need income immediately? Can they afford to pay those taxes immediately? It just really depends on what the person needs. I personally think, it'd be best to try to roll it over into a Roth IRA. So because when you put it into a Roth IRA, your money grows tax-free and you don't have to worry about the tax consequences in the future. You don't have to worry about taking those required minimum distributions or running into the issue that you didn't take it out correctly and you get that 50% penalty. I think, but it really depends on the person, because if you have a large amount into let's say your 401k, and you'd like to roll that over into a Roth IRA, obviously you can't do that directly, but you want to go doing that, you might be hit with a big tax consequences. So let's say that year you have a major amount of other income coming in. So you could be in a higher tax bracket. So you have to look at the client and what their needs are. Maybe doing it the following year would be better because they have their less income coming in. So that wouldn't put them up in such a high tax bracket if they're doing some type of Roth conversion.
What's your bottom line, top piece of advice for people who are approaching retirement today?
I think my top piece of advice is that get with a fiduciary advisor who's willing to take a deep dive with you and start looking at tax strategies. Plan when and how to take income and withdrawals from different sources. Plan how you can, if you're going to need that money right away. Determine if it makes sense to pay taxes before you really need to avoid that higher tax down the road, like doing Roth conversions. Maybe take a real hard look at your expenses. A lot of times people come into me and I ask them, I say, hey, how much are your expenses going to be now? And what are your expenses going to be in retirement? And sometimes they'll say, oh, it's only going to be a couple thousand a month. So once you do that breakdown with them, and I tell them, well, just take a month and just kind of figure out exactly what you're spending for that month. And when they come back to me, more times than not, they're saying, oh my gosh, we're spending $4,000 a month in expenses. It's not $2,000. And so that really, it takes as an advisor, I'm listening to that. And so I have to gauge, how much income are they really going to need in their retirement? Before it was based on their expenses of $2,000, now it's $4,000.
Sure.
I think the most important thing is strongly look at investing for income. That allows you to receive your interest and dividends and produces it without selling any shares to get you that money that you need when you're in retirement. One of the biggest mistakes that I see retirees do, one of the mistakes that I'm seeing a lot of is, and questions, is people are saying, should I take my Social Security now or should I take it later? And so they're drawing upon their Social Security and that's just letting their IRAs alone. Well, the problem with that is, your Social Security grows you after your full retirement age at about an average of 8% a year until you're 70. So if you're drawing on your Social Security early, you lose out on that benefit as well. So one of the things that I'd like to share with people is, look at investing for in your retirement, you're investing for income. And the reason being is because when you were contributing to your 401k, you were making those contributions every month, and that was building that way. Well, now in retirement, you're needing to take it as a distribution. So now you have to look at things differently. You can no longer really look at growth. You have to start looking at income, looking at those things that are going to produce some interest and dividends for you that will allow you to maybe live off those interest and dividends without having to sell shares to be able to get that income you need in retirement. So those are some of the things that you need to look at.
Yeah, that's probably always the biggest piece of advice for people approaching retirement, is making it also important transition from being total return focused to being income focused. Lorraine Grossman, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you for watching today's video, Timely Tax Tips for 2022 and Beyond. If you enjoyed it, click the thumbs up button, give us a like, and make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel for new content each and every week.